Hello people, today I'm doing a Spider-Man tier list all the way from 2002's Spider-Man till now, till 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home. And yeah, I wanted to do this tier list because I went out of my way to review every movie. So let's just do this tier list. So screen recording in 3, 2, 1. I did it before, you always have to see where you're gonna put each before you do the tier list. So yeah, they're all in the F tier right now because I need to put them somewhere. None of these movies are F tier, so there you go. So first off, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man Far From Home is a entertaining blockbuster, but for like a Spider-Man tier list, like, there's two ways to do this list, like strictly a Spider-Man film versus a movie level. So I'm just going to do a mix of both. And for a Spider-Man film and a movie level, I think, like I said in my No Way Home spoiler review, I think No Way Home kind of complemented Far From Home very, very well when it comes to the way that No Way Home ended, and the way that Far From Home kind of, can't really get into it without spoiling No Way Home, but for right now, I want to put Far From Home in the B tier, just because it's a very fun movie. There's some frustrating plot things in this movie, particularly with the Edith glasses or lines of dialogue that frustrate me. Like Tony said this, that blah 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 blah. I'm like, how'd you know that? Or stuff like that. Particularly like the Edith glasses and the Stark drones and Stark villain. It's just like it grew kind of old, kind of fast, and I appreciate that they tried in that area, but I think at the end of the day, it's still fun and entertaining. Next up, Spider-Man 2 S. It's just pure Spider-Man. It's the stuff I want to say about it right now is all spoilers for No Way Home, but I'll just say No Way Home also makes this movie a little bit better as well. No Way Home made a lot of these movies even better, but this movie, you get much of a mental deep dive into Peter Parker. 80% of this movie is just Tobey Maguire being Tobey Maguire, just Peter Parker, not so much Spider-Man. And that's what I love. You get to know the guy behind the mask more so. You get to know his family more. You get to know, obviously, and the villain, Otto Octavius, you learn so much about him. You feel bad for him. His story is so really well done in this movie. And yes, there's some frustrating things with MJ, but, that's just life. And so seeing Peter go through it is just all you want to see. The movie's a classic. What do you want me to say? Moving on to the next movie. Spider-Man Homecoming. I would have put it here, but after rewatch, I want to put it in the A tier. I still think this is a fantastic Spider-Man movie. And the thing is, it's just that I ran into a lot of pacing issues the most rewatch. Like, I think it's kind of like goes by fast, slow, go by fast. It feels kind of clunky when it comes to its pacing. But minus that, I think the third act of this movie is fantastic. I think it's one of the few Marvel movies. Something I noticed, the third act to all three of these Spider-Man movies, there really isn't a weak third act in there. I really can't think of an act that, a third act in these Spider-Man movies that are pretty bad. So, because, there's tons of Marvel movies where the third act you just go like, yeah. But none of these Spider-Man movies have that problem. But Spider-Man Homecoming, Vulture. I just love Michael Keaton's Vulture. And it feels like they set up a lot of stuff in this movie that hasn't really come back yet, hopefully. Hopefully yet is the right word. But who knows at this point. I think Tom Holland is perfect as Spider-Man in this movie. And Far From Home, not so much. And I wouldn't even... the first half of No Way Home, I wouldn't even call... like this perfect adaptation of Peter Parker. I think the second half of No Way Home is a perfect adaptation. But yeah, like a definitive beginning to end Peter Parker. I think Homecoming is a fantastic example. Coming up next is The Amazing Spider-Man 2, entertaining but flawed. C tier. Yeah, I wish I liked this movie more. It has a lot going for it, but with lackluster villains, lackluster villains, lackluster story, lack of care. But I think it's a very fun movie to watch, if that makes sense. I think there's a lot of fun action here. I think there's a lot of great visuals. Hans Zimmer's score is great. The suit looks great in this movie. They got a lot, like, right. A lot of the problems become just roots from behind the scenes and on paper. So, but when it comes to technicalities, this movie is probably, like, if this movie just, like, had the type of writing, like even like the writers team of like Homecoming, I would say like this would probably be up here in the A tier. But sadly, there's not a lot of effort put into the script, or maybe there was too much effort, if that makes sense. So yeah, next up, The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm sorry to say that I like this one a little bit less than The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think The Amazing Spider-Man tries, but I'm not intrigued, particularly with another villain problem in this movie. And most particularly, I have absolutely no connection, particularly the Lizard. I don't like the Lizard villain. I just don't like him. It's like, we've seen this villain before, and I don't think the Amazing Spider-Man movies have strong villains at all. But, I like that this movie tries to be a little bit grittier, but like almost like the grounded Dark Knight take on Spider-Man, but it didn't necessarily work for me. I think Andrew Garfield's great. I think all three of these Spider-Man are great. And yeah, unfortunately, this one's probably my least favorite of the bunch, but I appreciate elements there, but I had no intrigue in the villain. The first half, like, you know what's going to happen, and it doesn't feel justified to have this story. But, it's just like, thinking about the context of this movie, that they just ended the Raimi trilogy because they wanted to make this, and knowing that they made this, thinking that, it's meant to restart, give you the refresh button, when I don't think it's nearly at the same quality, that's how I feel about it. Coming up next is Spider-Man 2002. Shoot it up, all the way up to the A tier, better than Homecoming, if it'll let me do that. There you go. Spider-Man 2002, I just love this movie. And if this movie didn't have, like, the last, like, 30 minutes or so minutes, like, lifting it up as well as it does, it would probably I think I'd like Homecoming a little bit more. But this movie gets the perfect amount of comic bookiness, the perfect amount of cheesiness, the perfect amount of filmmaking. Everything just kind of worked out with this movie, if that makes sense. I think Tobey Maguire is a fantastic Spider-Man. I think they got the origin very, very, very well for when like early 2000 comic book movies, and they got it this well. It's very impressive. Yeah, I think the action sequence at the end with Goblin and Spider-Man is just classic. And the Thanksgiving scene, there's so many standout scenes in this movie, and the only thing that just kind of puts it from being as good as the rest of them is just, like, particularly with Spider-Man 2, is they took everything that worked about this movie and just doubled down on it in Spider-Man 2. So, yeah, it's just, like, the fact of knowing that it only gets better. But yeah, next up we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Go ahead and put it in the A tier. The thing that kind of holds it back from going above these ones is that I think that the Kingpin, I could use a little bit more of him, and I thought the story itself, or the plot of getting from place to place, felt a little generic. But the fact that this movie has just as a generic plot that it does, and it still manages to be this good, shows you how much care and passion was put into this movie. Miles Morales, they got pitch perfect. The casting for all the voices for the Spider People was so good. They got a lot right in this movie. The family dynamic between Miles and his uncle, the animation style of this movie is so good as well. The action hits really hard for an animated kids movie. Like, it hits harder than some action sequences in some of the Raimi movies, and maybe even some of the Watts movies. But yeah, I think this movie understands what Stan Lee wanted out of the Spider-Man character. It's what he wanted. as the message and heart and soul of this character that he loves and cares for. So yeah. Anyways, next up we have Spider-Man 3. Going to the C tier, at the top of the C tier. Because when this movie shines, it really shines. When this movie's good, it's excellent. When this movie's bad, it's terrible. And we all know the famous nightclub scene and all that, but at the very least, this movie has elements where, like, when they did something they liked, they just went for it. So, yeah, like, everything they did with James Franco's character and, well, Harry Osborn, I should say, the way that they kind of wrap it up overall, I think is a pretty good job. Of course, there's an overabundance of villains here. Venom does not need to be in this movie. I don't know why he's here. He feels so shoehorned in. Sandman, I thought, was a okay villain. I don't like his introduction of, like, well, he was the guy that really killed your uncle. It just felt kind of like punched the other two movies right in his face. But, you know, the way they executed it wasn't that bad. So, yeah, that's where I wish we had Amazing Spider-Man 3. But, and heck, I don't even love, those movies, but I still want to see how they would have wrapped up Amazing Spider-Man 3. Because clearly, as you can see, I don't hate any of these movies. But yeah, anyways, lastly, we have Spider-Man No Way Home. And I'm going to put it in a spot where I would have never, ever, ever, ever thought I would put it. And this shocks me, the fact that I'm putting it there. Not there. There. I know. I am shocked that I put this movie in front of the first two Raimi films. I never, ever, ever in a million years thought I would do that. And I'll just say, if this movie had just as good as, if its first half of the movie was just as good as the second half, I would make an S tier and put this movie there. But the first half, you know, it's very reminiscent of Far From Home. The first half of this movie is kind of a weird mix between Far From Home and Homecoming. And, like, in terms of quality, I think the first half of No Way Home is, like, a little bit better than Far From Home, but not as good as Homecoming, while the second half is easily the best of the three. So this one's easily my favorite of the Watts films. But that second half just really hit it home for me. And if you've seen the movie, you know why. But I've seen this movie twice now. It just blows my mind every time. It understands the character by the end. The moments of where this movie soars is so good, and I'm not talking about fan service. I'm just talking about the quality of the movie. Like, the action sequences is the best of all of these movies, without a doubt. I just love almost every choice they made. The way that they flesh out even the characters that you thought would just be there for fan service, like Otto and Goblin. They kind of flesh them out and give them, like, better arcs. It's just amazing how we literally have a movie with this much stuff in it, but it never feels unfocused or like how Amazing Spider-Man 2 could feel. It just has such a good balance of everything. And I never thought I'd say this. I thought this movie would be a jumbled mess a year ago. But here it is, my favorite Spider-Man movie. So yeah, comment down below what your ranking is. Obviously, you know, you could see my top from worst to best. And I don't really dislike any of these movies. Like, I know I have 3 of them in the C tier, but C isn't terrible. I just kind of go like, with them. Like, it's not bad, but I wouldn't really call it great either. Well, I wouldn't really call those movies good per se. It's just I don't dislike them. Like, I don't dislike any of these movies. So yeah. Anyways, comment down below what would you rank them as. I'm very curious to see how Spider-Man fans are going to be reacting to this tier list and what theirs are. So yeah. Anyways, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that, and adios.